Welcome to the Build, Tell, Sell podcast, where we have behind the scenes conversations about the art of brand building, marketing, and sales strategies with creative industry insiders. I'm your host, Pell of Pell NYC. In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking to Branden Peters, who is the co-founder of Only Facts. His company houses his brands DayOne Radio, an urban podcast that's been running for 6 years, and Hip Hop Trivia in Atlanta, that is a reoccurring game night revolving around various facts in hip hop culture. Branden has also worked in broadcast TV, digital, and physical spaces, from producing content all the way from marketing various assets, and has also worked on the Sprite campaign that debuted in Super Bowl 53. Branden is currently a senior culture marketing manager at Redbull as well. So, I know you from doing marketing in various aspects. Man of multi facets. So I think we just started at the beginning, being a guy from Oakland. What prompted you to get into marketing, and how did you start that?
Man, I had no desire or even thought to get into marketing. It just kind of happened by chance. I was working in television even before I graduated from school, Clark
Oh
Atlanta
wow!
University. Just behind the scenes stuff or whatever. I was blessed to have people that looked out for me or whatnot that plugged me in to different situations.
How
And
did that actually start though? And what
just
were you doing?
people that I knew, like literally, I started doing like master control work when I was like a junior in college because Reggie, and I can't remember his last name, but he was like one of the instructors at Clark Atlanta in the mass comm department that really put a lot of us up on game and actually plugged us into situations where we could make money. So he plugged me in with the local PBS station here, so I was doing that. My homeboy plugged me in to do like kind of like audio troubleshooting for the Atlanta Braves. So when I was in school, I was there during All-Star Game, there during the World Series, all of that stuff. And then he plugged me in with doing some like behind the scenes work at Turner. So I was working for Turner before I even graduated from Clark Atlanta.
What were you doing for them?
It was some master control work, some like QC stuff, like making sure that there's like so many rules with commercials and stuff. So making sure that the edits were right and things of that nature. It was boring as hell to me at the time, but it was cool. Ironically, me and DJ Drama both worked at Turner fresh out of school. That was both our jobs before we went on to do things that we actually wanted to do. We see each other in the hallways all the time, just look at each other like, bro, I can't wait to get out of here. So yeah, I did that. I worked at Turner for about a year and a half, 2 years, and this lady worked with my mom, and the lady was an anchor at a television network called Tech TV in San Francisco, and Tech TV ended up getting bought, becoming G4 TV,
Oh,
and then Esquire, and then I don't know what it was after that, but I took a gig as a satellite producer at Tech TV. I was like 23, 24 years old, so it
and
was
what is a satellite producer?
basically I would like prep guests, book the guests, satellite time. Back in the day, this is before Zoom and all that stuff. We talking 2000, 2001. So it's like if I want to talk to you in New York, I need you to have some kind of a satellite feed coming
Oh,
from your
okay.
studio or whatever. So I would sit down with the guests like, hey, this is what the host is going to talk to you about. Are you ready? We're hitting at this time. Let me call and extend this satellite feed if we go
Mm,
over, all of that type stuff. So it just so happened that I was working there when 9/11 happened. So while everybody else is freaking
yeah.
out, I was dating a woman that lived in New York at the time, and she was like, "Yo, I was supposed to be at the World Trade Center today. Something happened. Turn on the news. I turn on the news. I turn on the news. I see the second plane hit, and I called my boss like, yo, if the bridge is open, because I was living right outside Oakland in San Leandro, I was like, if the bridge is open, I'm on my way in." And that was kind of like the beginning of the end for the TV stuff for me because they laid off 30% of the company not
Yeah.
long after 9/11. I moved back to Atlanta. Two of my homeboys, Deshaun and Donald, had a company called D-Day Entertainment, and they basically had like grassroots marketing contracts with a bunch of different companies from Rockefeller to Rockaware or whatever. So I started just working with them. They plugged me in with some contracts. So I did stuff with Hawaiian Punch. I did stuff with like Wrigley's, New Balance, all kind of stuff, like kind of running grassroots campaigns in the Southeast region.
So
And that's how I,
let me ask you this. So did
yeah.
any of the knowledge that you got from the broadcast world play into this at all, or no?
I, I don't think so. Not really. The thing that I left out is I was writing like freelancing the entire time. So
What
what
type of
that
writing?
actually, just freelancing for different websites and magazines. So mostly like hip hop stuff, some of everything because I wrote a lot in college as well. Excuse me. So I sports stuff and music stuff. So it didn't really help in that vein, but what it did do was like give me more professional contacts, show me how
Mm.
actual big budget shows are run, show me different rules and things of that nature with media. So it definitely helped me out in that aspect. And it was just really like overall like a good experience for me. I knew that I did not want to work in a small market. Like I went to college because I wanted to be a sportscaster. I interned at KGO in San Francisco. I interned at ESPN um, in Connecticut and all of that stuff, and actually turned down a job at ESPN because I didn't want to live in Connecticut.
Mm.
It was terrible when I lived there. No, don't disrespect to anybody from Connecticut that's listening or watching, but I hated it. So it was
Why?
just
Because it
one of
was
those.
so different from Atlanta and the
It
Bay.
was just like boring to me, man. Like I wasn't feeling it. Like it was just boring. It wasn't much going on. If I was not working, like there was literally nothing to do.
Got you.
And mind you, I'm young. So it's like it would be different if I was like 35, 30 or something like that. I'm in my super early 20s. I
Yeah.
didn't want to do that. But so the marketing thing really I got introduced through Deshaun and Donald for the most part and just kind of learning everything to do in that vein. And that ended up helping me tremendously with the next level of my career.
But so when you was working with them, where were you at? Because I know that you bounced around a couple of times. Were you
I
actually
was
living
back
in
in
it?
Atlanta. I was back
Okay.
in
All
Atlanta
right.
on
All
that.
right.
Yeah.
So what was the next step after that?
Started freelancing super duper heavy, like freelance writing heavily. So basically, the freelance checks were like the here and there checks that we're doing. You know, it was cool or whatnot. And then the working with them on the marketing stuff was that's what was the consistent check or whatnot. So it was great for me during the time. Like, I was living in Atlanta. It wasn't expensive to live in Atlanta at the time. Bills weren't super high. So it was good.
I mean, that's the dream for everybody. You want to try to like get as many checks as you can and live below those means, right?
Yeah,
All of that
exactly.
stuff. But so when who were you actually writing for at the time? Like what type of
At
freelancing?
that time, I was writing for a small company called Rolling Out that's still around today. I was writing for Showcase Magazine, which was a magazine out of the Bay Area that is the precursor to a lot of regional music magazines. So the Ozones, they got big later, things of that nature. I
Yeah.
had a shout out Frank who ran Showcase, and like they really like super plugged me in like from day one. And it's funny because one of the music editor there is a guy by the name of Will Bronson who is heavy in artist management now. We're still really good friends to this day. So it was that popped it off, and then Source magazine, rap pages, but writing for the Source when the Source was like the Source
Yeah.
back then, that really like super helped me out, and that super put my name out there for real in the journalism sector.
Yeah, those I think that those beginning connections as far as your network with people who are making their bones the same way that you are, having to do the heavy lifting, not all the pretty stuff. is very
Yeah,
important, especially as your career starts to grow. Because, like you said, those people, they become that person in this big position right now that you're
yeah,
actually able to call upon and do some magnificent things, wherever you're at currently. You know,
yeah, absolutely right.
that stuff is important. So basically, you've done a lot of connecting the dots in Atlanta,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So
Coming
how much different was, living in the Bay and then coming to Atlanta? How much different was that, and how much did you have to get acclimated?
night and day, night and day. It probably took me 2 years to get used to being out here in Georgia. Like it's especially then because you got to think I'm 43, so I came out to Atlanta or in Georgia in '94. So this is
Oh, it was
pre
totally different.
everybody. Yeah, this is pre everybody having the internet. This is like the world was a lot bigger then.
Yeah.
So it was just weird. Like I had never been to a party and didn't go do a metal detector before. I had
What, a
never
house party?
no, like a club or something like that.
Oh, I
Um,
feel you on that. I'm saying way being in New York, but I was like, I thought you talking
yeah,
about house party. I was like,
you
yo,
know,
y'all living different.
great. And not that I like, both. I grew up with both of my parents. Like
Yeah.
they were lower middle class or whatever. So it's not like I grew up like super, super in the hood, but it was just night and day. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't used to walking into a bank and there not being plexiglass up between you and the person,
Oh,
or I wasn't used to people seeing you on the street and smiling and saying hello. I will never forget as long as I live. I was in Kroger one day and this older black woman was like, "Baby, I don't know where you from. I don't know what you're going through, but it's okay to smile and speak to people." And
wow.
I was like, yes, ma'am. Like, you know what I
Oh
mean?
no,
Like,
I was the same way going down to Virginia when I first started designing with RP55 and those guys. It was it was I mean, even when I was in the military, it was just different. And then when I moved back up to New York, it's like I had like a Virginia veneer on me, and I was like crossing my regular street in my neighborhood, like the big boulevard. I wasn't
yeah.
even built for that no more. It's like I was stopping, watching the traffic. I was also like walking down the street, and I was the guy who was saying hello to everybody in New York, like, "Hey, how you doing?" Blah blah blah. So they're looking at me weird.
Right.
So I definitely get the difference in
Yeah.
acclimation.
I think the main thing, though, and this is a positive, I had never seen black people with, I guess, the black level of legal generational wealth until I moved to Atlanta and
That's a
went to
beautiful
school in
thing.
the AUC. So seeing people drop their kids off in super nice cars and my roommate in college, his father was the head of the CDC and then became the Surgeon General of the United States. That
Wow.
was completely and totally unfathomable to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Growing up, like that's a different level of status.
Oh, so you have all the insight to the coronavirus.
Oh man, I wish. I wish.
You had masks and gloves way before everybody. I feel you. I mean that's good stuff. I think the travel is very important, and when you're able to like reacclimate yourself in a different environment, it gives you a different skill set.
For sure.
To also navigate, and saying hello and smiling to people isn't a bad thing either. And I think
Not at
that
all.
that also helps with networking. So you're doing all of this stuff, you're freelancing. Well, let me ask you this, because I met you, the first date I met you was during your podcast
Yep.
when you was doing DayOne radio. And
Yep.
I mean, I got pulled into it very randomly through shout out to Gerard of School of Hard Knocks. I forgot why I was down there, and he was just like, "Come on, I'm
You
doing."
were at we were at a trade show. They were doing some trade show in Atlanta, and you were
Oh,
working on an accessories line, I
yeah,
believe,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's how we
yeah,
met.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
doing a bag line. Yeah, I was doing a bag line at the time because I know it was very random that I was down there in Atlanta, and
yeah.
so DayOne radio. He told me, and I want to correct me if I'm wrong, but he told me that we were your first guest.
I think you guys were the second guest.
Okay, all right. Top
Uh,
three. I'll take that.
Yeah, you guys were this. I believe you were the second guest. I think the first guest was Problem. Shout out to my boy Problem from Compton, who actually just dropped this short on Tidal called A Compton Story. That's super dope with Punch from TDE, Mike Epps, Snoop, whole bunch of people in it. Problem and this other rapper from Watts, Bad Luck, were the two first guests. They were together on the show, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken. That
that's
was
dope. That's
almost.
dope.
It'll be 7 years in October. Like we were super ahead of the game on the podcast thing.
Yeah, so building something like that, how did your networking help you in your first iteration of doing a podcast, and especially being so early in the game of doing podcasts?
It helped tremendously because I had come from, by that time I had been an editor at Double XL. I had written, cover stories and did big articles for Source. Had been on the staff at Vibe. I believe I had been on the staff at Complex by then too, doing like online stuff. So I worked with and knew everyone, and not just the artists and athletes or whatever, but also the publicists and managers. So once you are in all of those circles, for me, I'm getting a million emails a day anyway saying this product is coming out, this product is coming out, or this artist has this coming out, or whatever. So it just helped tremendously. I was like, oh, I have a new situation as well. So, let's talk over here or whatnot. And at that time, it was, I think in our lane, it was Seif and Peter Rosenberg doing a podcast. I think they were the first to do a quote unquote hip hop podcast.
Yeah,
You had Combat Jack, and
no,
I
God bless
think
him.
that was, yeah, God bless Reggie, man. Rest in peace. Really missed that dude for real. And I think that was it. Like it was minimal. It
Yeah,
might have been, as far as podcasts that people knew that covered like black culture, it might have been 5 to 10, maybe.
yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, it helped tremendously. Like because between myself, Maurice, and our former co-host Nadine, like we knew everybody that we needed to talk to, or we were 2 degrees separated from anybody that we wanted to get on the show.
Oh, that's great, penetrating that market at such an early stage of it, and you're
For
still
sure.
currently doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Every week, you can watch it on Live Hip Hop Daily, YouTube, all those places, and if you want to listen, we're on all. I think we're pretty much everywhere but Title. This Title is real weird about the podcasts that they let on their situation that aren't exclusively signed to them. But yeah, we drop episodes every single week.
What days can people tune into your podcast?
Every Thursday, we drop a new podcast every Thursday morning. The latest one is with Sekou Smith, who hosts NBA Hang Time podcast and also is on NBA TV all the time. So we talk with him about the suspended season and this Hall of Fame class and all of that stuff around the NBA. I'm a big sports guy, and me and
Yes.
Sekou, I've been on NBA Hang Time podcast, and I've done some voiceover and script writing work for NBA TV. So it was cool for him to come on our platform as well.
Yeah, I was very surprised how much you're into sports. Golden State, especially,
Oh,
like,
absolutely,
and
absolutely.
you being flown all over the place to actually talk about sports. So it's like heavy music influence,
Yeah,
heavy sports influence, and building a bunch of different brands and platforms from DayOne Radio, and then you also were doing like and still doing hip hop trivia down in
yeah,
Atlanta, and
yeah.
branding that and building that. So in building all of these different platforms and juggling, your own, still doing the marketing things for other clients or what have you, how do you find that process of you building these different entities simultaneously? Is there any crosstalk as well that goes between them?
I try not to ever, like when I'm on a 9 to 5 or working with a client. I try not to ever bring in my situation for it to be like, hey, and we also need to throw some money at this, because
Yeah,
I feel like that's kind of a conflict of interest. I allow them to see how dope what I'm doing is, and then they jump on it, and
yeah.
that's kind of how it's been, and that's what I'm most comfortable with
I mean,
as
that's smart.
well. Yeah, I mean, I just, especially being I'm always one of the few brothers in the room, so I don't want no funny, no funny business later on
Yeah.
down the road or whatnot. So, yeah, but it's definitely prioritizing. The good thing is for me, I'm used to I worked in television, live television. So none of this stuff is hectic to me. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like,
gotcha.
so like at a very young age, I worked in, especially like I said, during 9/11, to where it's like I'm pulling stuff from a million different sources and things of that nature. So it's like, it's not a, none of this stuff is really like a life or death or a huge deal to me. Like we're
Mm,
not curing a disease. We're not doing heart surgery. Like it's marketing and branding. Like at the end of
yeah.
the day.
So let's get a little bit more into marketing. I know that right now you're doing stuff for like Red Bull, right?
Right.
So
hmm
what is your title over there? Senior Vice President?
I wish. So I'm the one of the senior culture marketing managers, and basically what that is at the end of the day in my region, which is the Southeast, I am in charge of how the brand looks culturally. So art, fashion, music, whatever, pretty much everything but sports and straight up branding is my thing. So it's cool, it's fun, it's challenging, but
What are some of the challenges of marketing in those
it's
lanes?
it's just because I'm fairly new. I've been there. Like I left my last position about at the end of 2019. So it's just learning the system. Like they're very successful at what they do. So I'm just trying to figure out like how me and my unorthodox, systems work in place with that. But the good thing is everybody from leadership down that I've met globally, nationally, regionally is super supportive, and they all like kind of like are very interested to know what I bring to the table and how we can implement it, which is dope.
Where were you
So
before this?
I was a creative director at an agency called Havas. So we Annex is like the cultural offshoot of Havas. Havas is a huge company that's owned by Vivendi, which also owns Universal and water companies and all kind of crazy stuff out of France. So pretty much there, I was in charge of the team that worked on a lot of digital stuff for and social stuff for Sprite and Fanta.
Oh, oh
Yeah,
yeah, you ran the Sprite campaign that my
yeah, the Sprite way
friend's
thing.
son was
Yeah,
on. What was
exactly.
that during the Super Bowl that it premiered?
But
When did it
man,
premiere?
all of that stuff is a blur. I
Yeah.
think it was, yeah, I think it was around February of 2019, I believe. But
Yes.
yeah, so that was
Very random. My friend calls me and asked me if I knew you, and I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm in my living room with him right now. I was like, wait. And this is my friend from the military, right? So it's
yeah,
like, why are y'all together? And he's like, oh,
yeah,
my
man,
son made it to this campaign, this major campaign. And, I was like, wow, this is like the universe, the world, like you said, the world was
super
a bigger place
small.
before. Now it's like
Yeah,
super small.
shout out to Seth and Cody Shane. That was basically a campaign. We had this whole thing of my team and I came up with this whole thing of actually putting on real people that are into Sprite. Like Sprite has like some of the best brand loyalty, not even just in the beverage business, but just across the board. So we came up with that, came up with the strategy, came up with the social marketing campaign. The rest of the team really loved it and they implemented it across the board. And that's how the whole commercial idea came about. So, I sat in the room with the higher ups or whatever and helped cast the commercial. And it just so happened that Seth, who was a graduate or a student at my alma mater,
Oh wow,
fit
I didn't
the
even know that.
mold best, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah.
And and thankfully, the people who really make decisions agree with me, and we got it on.
Nah, that was dope. It was weird to see him on the big screen.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Definitely was weird, but that was dope. Small world. So
for
making
sure.
your transition over to Red Bull, I mean, is there a different marketing approach in general? Are you still handling like social content as well?
Nah, I don't touch social at all. This is um, more so like tapping in with the influencers and the talent, in the region, and working with them. It's on that part. It's very similar because at Sprite or at Havas going through Sprite, it was a thing where we really, really, really wanted to put on talent across the board that wasn't getting their shine. And Red
Mhm.
Bull's whole thing is, and you see on the commercial, Red Bull gives you wings. That's not just referring to drinking Red Bull, but it's also referring to like we give wings to artists, we give wings to creatives. Anybody who's ever been to a Red Bull event, has seen that or whatnot. So my thing is it's more so that and just tying in with the other departments on how we can reach, the different goals and KPIs or whatnot across the board through doing things with culture. So it's different in that aspect for sure. Like I don't touch social media at all in this gig.
So let me ask you. I mean, social's very important right now, right?
Super important.
So, what type of advice would you give to local talent that's trying to get on a bigger stage right now, regardless of what they're doing? If it's fine art, if it's coming out with a clothing brand, it's somebody going into music. What could they do with their social?
Have a
Some key
plan.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, have a plan. Like, don't just wing it. Like, really figure out what your goal is for your social media marketing. Take really good pictures because people don't read. Um, Look at analytics. Like, see what people that already follow you are into, what they react to, and keep doing that. And also be consistent. Like, don't like post once a week or whatever. I think it's super weird. I always run into it with artists, visual artists, painters, recording artists, or whatever. That they like, I will go on there and say, I want to put this person on with this particular company. And they're like, oh, send me their Instagram. I send the Instagram. And yesterday it was 100 posts, and today there's one. I'm like, fam, stop deleting everything off your like. I don't think it's
That's
not.
me.
It's like there has to be a balance between those two things because it happens all the time, man. Like it's happened to me at least 15 times. And it's just like it's yes, it is for your fans as well. But if you are trying to work with corporate brands, there needs to be a place where people can see what you do.
True.
And
Yeah, there's your portfolio.
unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, people do not have portfolios online outside of IG. So,
Yeah.
that's where people will go off top.
I mean, I feel like they're gonna, even if you have your own website with your portfolio there, you have your works, what have you.
Yeah.
People are still gonna go to your IG, one, to see those works, but also to get an idea of who you are and how you
Yep.
represent yourself, right? So,
Absolutely.
what
Absolutely.
other gems would you give them as far as their social? I mean, that was good.
You kind of hit on it right there. Like there's a young man that I, inadvertently kind of mentored here and there. And he was like, I don't know what he was doing. Like I've spent time with him and his mother, so I know what type of time he's on. And there was just like a bunch of, the money phone pictures and the couple guns here and there. I'm like, damn, stop. Like just
Yeah,
that doesn't need to be everything don't need to be shared. Some things can be kept private. Like curate what you're doing. You are a recording artist. Like you make really good music. You just haven't fully got on yet. So dude, just and I say that for everybody. Like be very I feel like your social media presence is creeping up on being as important as your credit score. Like,
yeah,
be very careful about what you post because people are looking and things are forever. Even if you delete it, if somebody has screenshot it or
yeah.
saved the link and copied it, it's
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen that episode of Black Mirror on Netflix. The one that was talking about the literally your social standing was your credit score, and if you
I
didn't have
haven't.
a man, it's crazy. If you didn't have a certain social standing, you couldn't rent in a particular building. You know, people started
Wow.
shying away from you if you started declining. So everybody was hyper nice to one another, so that they would get
Wow.
a like for that immediate interaction. You know, but I think that we are in a place where your social standing is very important. how many followers you have, what does your feed look like. I go on when I was riding on the train in the city, it's like everybody's on the gram. Like
Yep.
that is the number one platform that everybody's on. Like digesting, getting information, getting news. All of it isn't real or relevant,
Right.
But I definitely agree. I definitely agree.
Bro, you got to think this is where we are now. That the MTA or whoever the governing body is over the subway in New York chose to put Wi-Fi in before they put AC in the train stations. That's how crazy it is.
Hey, in Hong Kong, they've been had Wi-Fi all throughout the train, all throughout the subway, like super
Okay.
integrated. So that was a precursor to show you like where we were going. I usually look like when
Right.
it comes to tech, I definitely look that way to see like, okay, what's next? What's gonna happen? Like full integration. How is that gonna
Yeah.
happen? So now advice via being at Red Bull, right? Not talking about social, just regular marketing advice that you would give that same person on how they can spread their conversation.
It's again like figure out, and by no means do I consider myself like a marketing genius. I just know particular audiences and I know how to tap in with them. So I feel like you just have to really know your audience and target your audience, and don't feel like you have to have a ton of money. I feel like social media and social media ads are a great way to target audiences, and I feel like you got to talk to people. Like people don't buy people. I mean, people don't buy product. People buy people. So
Yeah.
if I rock with you and I'm like, oh, I really believe in what this cat is doing, then I'm more apt to buy something from your line, whether you're selling clothes or a service or whatever. Like I'm more apt to do that. But I feel like people really try to serve everyone. Unless you have a multi-million-dollar budget, you cannot serve everyone. You have to
True.
find your audience and pinpoint and then spread out from there.
Yeah, but I think even if you have a multi-million-dollar budget, you still should have this niche demographic. Your lens may get a little wider, but I don't think you should. If you try to service everyone, I think that you're going to run out of money,
Yeah,
right?
I agree. No,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Like what's cool to the young kid who's like 13 years old and the 19-year-old and the 80-year-old person, it's three different people, and then everything in between,
Man.
like it's I don't care what you're selling, what you're doing, music, whatever, you're not gonna hit everybody. You're not
You're
gonna
absolutely
like
right.
everybody ain't rocking with Drake.
You're
And
right.
everybody isn't rocking with Taylor Swift, right?
Yep.
So it's
You're
like you
right.
really gotta figure out like who you are and like you said, who you want to service. So let me dial back a little bit with your love of sports. Have you ever played any sports?
Just rec stuff, man. Rec stuff and a little bit of organized stuff. Like I still, well, before we got shut down, I would, do my best to go hoop like once a week or whatnot. But yeah, I used to like literally. It's crazy. I used to play ball when I was young. I would be at the park almost every day. Like yeah, like, and I was never great. I just love ball. You know what
I
I
mean,
mean?
I have a
Like,
lot of friends like that. I don't really understand it, and especially for my height, people
yeah,
swear that I play sports, and I'm like,
right,
I like to draw.
right, yeah. That and my dad was a track star back in the day, so he influenced me to run track. So I ran track a little bit in high school, or whatever. But I was never like I've never I definitely got my mother's genetic pool and not my dad's. Like my dad was like a stellar athlete. Didn't get that. I'm fast. My agility is not great. I had hops and I'm fast. That's about it. Everything else did not get.
Oh
If I
well,
got my dad's genetic pool fully, I would have not have paid a dime for college.
I feel you on that. I feel you on that. I mean, so you don't necessarily have the hops in
I
playing.
know more.
Yeah, well, hey, I feel you. But let me transition on hops. I also know that you're into craft beers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. That was nice. Look
Yeah.
at you. That was him. Yeah, yeah,
I don't wear this hat for nothing. Um,
yeah.
so so into craft beers. I remember. I don't know if it was that same trip, but you, I, and your friend Ale Sharpton, we went and y'all introduced me to the world of
Yeah,
craft beers. So, from what I understand now, you've delved way more into that.
yeah. And we haven't fully announced it yet, so I don't want to get deep into it. But me and my guy, Kev, are putting together a not put pretty much like a lifestyle company that gears towards craft beer enthusiasts, but also can appeal, to the average person that's into fashion. So we're at the, beginning stages now, just going over logos and things of that nature. And then um, I don't know why I can never remember this word, especially considering I work in marketing. Just basically testing things, with how different people and how they feel about the logo and whatnot. But
Mhm.
I think it's going to be really dope. Like we plan on launching this summer. I feel like it's needed for sure. Like I don't see anybody really taking full advantage of that space. And it's a vastly growing space, and it's going to be interesting how things work out now, because I'm seeing that a lot of craft beer companies, just on the beer side, are not great at marketing at all.
Yeah,
Like it's kind of sad. Like I saw a number, and it was a really big number, of how many craft breweries are looking to probably close during this period. And it's just like, yo, like if you there's so many ways you can get things to your customer base, but a
yeah,
lot of them just don't do it. I feel like they're so deep into the actual craft, no pun intended, of
yes.
making the brew, that they don't really understand the business side, and
Yeah.
that's what kind of it sucks, man. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, it's a localized thing that they're doing. It's very niche,
Mm,
very passionate, and they're pouring their heart into it.
yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it reminds me of streetwear. When
Hmm.
guys were first coming out with streetwear, they were doing it from a passion standpoint. It's like they weren't getting serviced by the clothing industry. They wanted
Yep.
to wear stuff different. It's like urban was really in. They wanted stuff um, slimmer. They needed stretch because a lot of them were skating. They needed to be active, but they didn't want to wear sweatpants and stuff like that. They went all the way down to wearing pants that almost look like jeggings, right? But
Hmm.
but their graphic language, how they were wearing stuff, nobody wants to dress like their dads. So it was like totally different. So but they poured their heart into it, started these beautiful niche stores, right? And all of that stuff is coming from the heart. But when that last recession hit, they were losing their shirts. A
Yep.
couple of them because they didn't, again, like you're saying, they didn't understand how to continue the business, how to like get through these rough times. They never saw it before, right? Like when you like even going back to what you were saying about 9/11, you're working in TV during 9/11, and during that time, like you made your bones right there. So now you're going through rough times right now. You're like, yeah, I kind of saw this already. I'm already ready for this. Some of these craft guys, they probably haven't been. And another thing is marketing is so important. Like Instagram, I suck, right? I suck at it because it's like, oh, I want to paint and I'm doing a podcast, but also I'm designing stuff for Kappa and all that stuff. And Instagram is secondary, but it's so important. So in in what you're doing, how does marketing? You feel like marketing actually help in the sale of product?
I think it helps tremendously, because it's, especially with lower price tier things or free things, like people are more apt to purchase them if they're inspired in some way. Like if I go into a store and I see Sprite next to Seven Up, next to Canada Dry, next to whatever, and I see that Sprite has put on this artist from my neighborhood or from my city, or I see that Sprite ran a campaign and ask, "Who are you feeling that's not getting shine?" And we put on, 40 of these people and partner with Spotify and Uprocks and all this stuff. So you're seeing how your thoughts translate into how a big brand does something. That shit is like, excuse my language, that's like NASCAR. Like it's like I see this brand rocks with my favorite driver, I'm gonna
Mm,
buy Tide for the rest of my life. It's the same thing. It's like I live in Atlanta. I'm into women rappers. I see Ray Moon is being put out there big time by Sprite. and she's on Up Rocks, and I see her on YouTube, and I see her on this and that and whatever. If I'm from the Bronx, and I love R&B and Moxie Knox, I see her video debuting on BET Jams or whatever, and I know that Sprite is who helped her get on. Then I'm more apt if I go to the store and I got $2 in my pocket to buy Sprite than another brand. Same thing with Red Bull, and Red Bull does an amazing job of being nimble with doing different type of cans, like the whole 3X thing that's out now. I don't even work on the sports side directly, but just like the 3-on-3 thing that they're pushing. So it's like, oh, that's even more of a tie-in. Like I'm into who 3-on-3 is in the Olympics, or Olympics push back to next year. But boom, I walk in, there's a bunch of energy drinks on the joint. I'm in the hoop. I see this Red Bull 3X can. I'm gonna buy that. It's just like that simple subconscious thing that goes there. And it's like, thankfully, I've been blessed to work with brands that actually do things in spaces that I'm already into.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I'm into hip hop and there's a brand that I'm not, that doesn't care about hip hop, or I look at their social media, it has nothing to do with hip hop, or I don't ever see them promoting anything that has anything to do with hip hop, I'm probably not gonna buy it if there is a brand that does these
Oh,
things.
true indeed, because it fits into your lifestyle. It's,
Exactly. So
most
that's kind of what I'm on. Like I said, I'm to me it's super simple. I just think people make things too complex sometimes.
when it comes down to like you making your budget, right? Are they looking at how much they put into this versus how much their sales are?
Um, to an extent, and granted, the budget conversations at Coke and at Red Bull are well, the overall budgets are well beyond my pay grade. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's definitely in the mix. Thankfully, both of those brands do very well. So it's been a thing where they took more chances. And being like, hey, we want to not only retain customers, we want to get new drinkers.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how we think we can do it. Like hip hop is the hottest thing on the planet right now. It has been for a while. It is the dominant pop culture. So it's a no brainer to bring in somebody like me who understands both sides of the fence, the corporate side and the real culture side. And I'm actually a part of the culture and a contributor to the culture. So I
Yeah.
think that gives them more confidence to put more, dollars behind things.
Yeah. And like starting out clothing brands, one of the rules of thumb is use 10%. Uh,
Mm,
it's like a 10% rule. If you know that you're supposed to be making your first time out, 100,000, well, you should use 10,000 to push that conversation, right?
okay.
So when you were working on smaller campaigns or even marketing your own things, did you have
Mhm.
like some kind of like math that you put or equation that you put towards that?
I didn't. Like you're putting me up on game. My thing would be the bigger the reward, the bigger the risk you take. Not even
Always.
risk, the bigger money, the bigger bread you put into marketing. So like with the hip hop trivia thing, which we've been doing for it'll be 4 years next month here in Atlanta. Like we got a ton of press and a ton of like celebrity involvement, like without putting any money out there. So when we would do bigger things, like when we would do paid events, I would put more money behind, behind advertising and marketing for sure because it's a bigger payout because people
Yeah.
are actually buying tickets to this, and we actually have companies coming in and spending money to be a part of it. Things of that nature. So it would be something simple like that. But it's for the most part like there wasn't a formula. Like you put me up on game with that, which is very helpful. But moving forward as we go into this craft beer lifestyle company thing. So I appreciate that. But yeah, it's my thing is thankfully we have been able to have a built-in audience from day one. Like we were almost successful. Like granted, we've had off times or whatever, but for the most part, like we have a really hardcore fan base with the hip hop trivia thing and with the podcast. It's been like weird because metrics and podcasting are not exactly accurate per se. So like even Apple stuff is still in beta. Like when you look, the last time I checked, as far as
Yeah.
their metrics and their analytics, so it's a little weird with that. But you know, I kind of I know who are I gauge it like if we have an NBA person on the show, or if we have a professional athlete on the show, I'm going to gear how I market that to people that are already into that.
Mhm.
I'm not going to market it to the same audience we did when we had Dick Gregory on, or when we had
True.
Just Blaze on, or whatever, because granted, there's going to be that few hundred people, 1,000 people, or whatever, who are going to listen regardless of who we have on.
Yeah.
But there's also that lane of those new listeners, and that's what you always want is new listeners, because
Yeah.
some of those people are gonna stay on.
Yeah. Yeah. Most definitely. I mean, again, you're capturing two different audience from Dick Gregory all the way down to Just Blaze. You know, you may
Yeah,
have some overlap too with that new customer. You know, with that
yeah,
new listener. You know,
exactly.
so for yourself, when you was doing like your podcast,
Yeah,
how did you, and I'm asking you also, I'm trying to have an understanding of this. It's like the monetization of that. You know,
right.
did you find yourself, you know, again, one of my questions was about the crosstalk between your things. Like,
Hmm.
did you see yourself having overlap with your podcast going towards the hip hop trivia as well to try to broaden those
Yeah,
audiences and bring
yeah,
them together?
absolutely, absolutely. We always promote the hip hop trivia. We've even got to the point this year when we were having people in studio before the quarantine, where we would do a segment asking people hip hop trivia questions, or trivia questions that have something to do with them. So there's always the cross marketing or whatnot with that. As far as like monetizing it, like thankfully we got into a position a couple years ago to where we signed on with an ad company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been good, and we've had quite a few different companies advertise on the podcast or whatnot, and it's cool money. It's not phenomenal yet, but
Mm-hmm.
again, we are
Building.
we're building, and I understand that we play a role to a particular audience. We're like the smart guy, hip hop podcast, a smart guy
Mm-hmm.
culture podcast. It's not, we're not gonna get drunk and talk a bunch of trash. We're not gonna ask you about your baby mama. We're not gonna, that's not our lane. And I understand
Are
that.
there any baby mama questions in hip hop trivia?
I'm sure we have. I'm sure we have in trivia before. It's because again, that's more of a like I can see that audience, so I know
Yeah,
how to.
I'd
Well, I
engage it.
can't see the podcast audience.
Yeah,
I get
yeah,
analytics, and that's just because I know what country you live in, or
yeah.
I know what. That's not telling me a whole lot. But yeah, it's one of those things where we just kind of tap in where we tap in, and it's thankfully we're not losing no money, and we've made more money than we've spent.
Oh, I mean, blessing. You know,
Yeah, for real, for real.
most definitely, most definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it, man. You gave me a lot of food. You got me looking at my Instagram like I suck. What's one closing jewel that you would like to drop, just in general, not necessarily in marketing, for that young kid that's out there, or that entrepreneur that's looking to start something? What's that one jewel that you would drop to them to inspire them?
I would say this, like up until like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I didn't know that researching was a skill. I had no idea. Like I would get frustrated when people ask me questions, and I'd be like, "What you mean, bro? Just look it up." You know what I mean? Now I understand that researching is a skill. I would say, really, when you're trying to learn something, look at multiple sources, read, watch YouTube, do whatever you need to do, and really figure out how to effectively search on Google or whatever search engine you like to use, because it's everything is out there. Like almost, I won't say everything. A good portion of the knowledge is out there, and you don't have to spend money for it. You just got to spend time. So if you want to
Yeah.
launch a clothing company, if you want to start selling your paintings, if you want to figure out how to get into art shows, if you want to figure out how to get your music on, DSPs, if you're trying to start a podcast, like there's so much information out there. Utilize it. Don't just go on what your homeboy say, your homegirl say, or what you see on Instagram. Dumb people know how to post too. Like find good sources and learn from there, man. Like there's so much knowledge out there that will save you so much heartache, so much lost money, and so much lost time.
No, I agree. I've been a proponent of that. Even doing this, you have to do deep dives and try to get that knowledge.
Yeah,
Man, YouTube University and Google, they're there for you, and
absolutely.
you'll learn how to build your website, make your product drop ship, everything.
Right.
And then
Everything.
you go to Fiverr, right?
Yep. Everything. Everything.
And you can learn about negotiating for the Fiverr guy as well.
Exactly.
But
Oh, that's another one. Once you have experience doing something and you have some stripes, never accept the first offer. Ever. Never accept the first offer. That's all what I tell young people that I mentor now, because they're gonna come back with something better.
yeah,
It's very rare that you be like, I can't do it for that, and they be like, oh, okay. Like if they want you, they want you.
I mean, even if they say okay, usually you're better off not messing with them because
Right.
they're the ones who give you the biggest headache.
You're right. You're
Yep.
absolutely
They got
right.
a gazillion changes and they have a lot of unreasonable requests that you're like,
Yep.
yo, this ain't even worth that short that I took on my bread.
Exactly.
Nah, I feel you on that. But my brother, I really do appreciate it. You taking the time, and I'm waiting for my shipment of Redbull.
I got you, bro.
I'm messing with you.
Appreciate it.
I'm messing with you, man. I really do appreciate it. All
Thank
right.
you, bro. Peace.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure that you subscribe to the show in iTunes or wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and give us a comment on your thoughts on this episode, ideas, and insight. Thank you.